Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today I'm going to explain a romance thriller movie called Boxing Helena. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The movie opens with a little boy named Nick approaching his father, who's working in the study room. However, he is quickly dismissed and asked to leave. Nick then goes to his house party, where an old man says that one day he'll be a successful doctor like his father. After that, the kid tries to approach his mother, but she also ignores him as she's busy flirting with a young man. The scene then cuts to many years later, when Nick's mother has just died and he's seen at her funeral. However, he doesn't seem sad, and immediately after the funeral goes to the hospital, where he works as a chief surgeon. Another doctor named Alan is preparing to perform a major surgery, assuming Nick isn't working today. But to everyone's surprise, Nick takes charge of the surgery and gets it done successfully. Later, he returns to the mansion where he grew up, which has been passed down to him after his parents' deaths. As Nick climbs the stairs, he is haunted by visions of his mother sleeping with different men in the house. When he cannot take it any longer, he rushes to a bar where he meets his colleague Lawrence.
Been hallucinating my mom having sex again, Lawrence.
The two then begin drinking when Nick's attention is suddenly drawn to a beautiful woman named Helena. They had slept together once, but he hasn't been able to get her out of his mind ever since. He becomes very anxious upon seeing her and immediately exits the bar. Following this, Nick contacts his girlfriend Anne, who works as a nurse at the same hospital as him. He informs her that he has decided to stay at his mother's place and invites her to move in as well. Anne is excited by the news and immediately agrees. Later, when Nick returns home, she's already there, unpacking her belongings. He then goes for an evening jog while Anne stays behind to prepare a romantic dinner. Next, Nick starts running around town and soon finds himself near Helena's house. He approaches her door and attempts to ring the bell, but he gets too nervous. Therefore, he climbs a nearby tree to get a clear view of her room. From there, he sees Helena drinking and undressing. Nick watches in excitement, but his mood suddenly changes when he notices her making love with her boyfriend, Ray. Unable to watch anymore, as Ray probably banged his mom too, he quietly climbs down the tree and leaves the place. Afterward, Nick walks to a nearby phone booth and calls Lawrence. He frantically asks how he can win Helena back, as he can't get her off his mind. Lawrence advises him not to ruin his relationship with Anne over a one-night stand from a long time ago. Nick pretends to agree and hangs up the phone, but he can't stop rambling over how beautiful Helena is. He then goes to a flower shop and sends her a bouquet, along with a letter inviting her to his housewarming party. When Nick returns home, he discovers Anne asleep on the couch. He gently covers her with a blanket and goes into his study to call Helena. However, when she answers the phone, Nick is too nervous to speak and hangs up right away. Helena believes someone is pranking her, so she gets annoyed and stops her love-making session with Ray. This frustrates the latter so much,
Babe, you know pranks get me freaking hard,
that he decides to go to the bar in search of another woman. Helena then asks him to get some groceries for her, but he declines. After Ray leaves, she calls the local grocery shopkeeper to order vodka, lime juice, and pomegranates. The next day, Ray returns to meet Helena and invites her to a club later, but she refuses. She then reveals that she has a party that night and will be leaving for Mexico the next day. Hearing this, Ray becomes annoyed and says he won't let her go, but she declares that she's ending their relationship. The crybaby Ray is infuriated by this and starts yelling at her. He claims that she has grown old and no longer has the charm she once had. However, Helena is unfazed by his words and kicks him out of the house. The scene then cuts to the evening where Nick is hosting a lavish housewarming party. Many guests are in attendance, some of which are VIPs, but Nick appears to only care about Helena and anxiously awaits her arrival. Meanwhile, Anne is talking to a friend who suggests that Nick may have thrown the party as a grand gesture to propose to her. Propose a three-way, maybe. This excites Anne, and she hopes it to be true. Shortly after, Helena arrives at the party, and Nick approaches her with excitement. She hands him her purse, and he begins following her around like a puppy. Helena soon comes across Nick's colleague Russell, a handsome young man. They hit it off immediately and begin flirting, much to our hero's annoyance. Helena then makes her way to the fountain where she undresses to her lingerie and begins to enjoy herself in the water. Nick is captivated by her beauty and continues to stare like a pervert. Afterward, Russell and Helena leave the party together, seemingly to make love. This devastates Nick, and he returns inside with a gloomy face. Lawrence immediately senses his distress and asks why he had to invite Helena and complicate things. Unfortunately, Anne overhears their conversation and feels upset. She angrily confronts Nick, asking if he has something going on with that woman. He hesitates to answer, so Anne figures out the situation herself and ends their relationship. However, Nick doesn't care about Anne and remains obsessed obsessed with Helena instead. He discovers she has left her purse behind and begins to cling to it. Soon he receives a voicemail from her asking him to deliver her purse to the airport early in the morning. The next day, Nick intentionally arrives at the airport late, causing Helena to miss her flight. She becomes very angry with him, but he apologizes and offers to arrange the next flight for her. Helena then looks inside her purse and discovers that her address book is missing. This further enrages her, and she starts accusing Nick of opening her purse. But he casually invites her to his house to retrieve the book and offers to drive her back to the airport. Helena is hesitant, but since she desperately needs the address book, she gets into his car. It was too easy in the days before cell phones. On the way, Nick repeatedly begs her to date him, but she makes it clear that she isn't interested. When they arrive, Helena demands her address book, but Nick starts lighting aromatic candles and invites her to a drink. She begins cursing at him, but he remains calm and asks her to try the meal he has prepared. He also reveals that the address book has been with him all along. Helena is livid upon realizing that he purposefully orchestrated the situation just to bring her to his home. She storms out with the book, but Nick follows her, pleading for her to stay with him. A fed-up Helena then stands in the middle of the road and tells him that she will never love him, and it should have been obvious after last night. Unfortunately, a truck appears out of nowhere and runs her over. The driver flees in panic while Nick rushes to her side. The scene then cuts to a week later, where we see the hospital director speaking with Anne and asking about Nick's whereabouts. It turns out he hasn't shown up in a week, which is a problem for the hospital because he's the chief surgeon. Anne admits that she hasn't seen him since the party, and the director mentions that if he doesn't return soon, they may need to find another surgeon to fill his position. Meanwhile, Dr. Allen overhears the conversation and realizes that this could be his chance for promotion. In the next scene, Allen arrives at Nick's house, and the latter reluctantly lets him in. Allen then informs him that if he doesn't intend to return to the hospital, he wishes to take over as chief surgeon. He asks Nick to write a letter of recommendation for him to the hospital director. Nick responds that he'll think about it and make a decision soon. Just then, Allen is startled by a noise coming from inside a room. Nick assures him that it is nothing and tells him to leave. However, another thumping sound comes from the room, prompting Nick to rush there. We then shockingly see Helena sitting on a chair with her limbs missing. Nick quickly adjusts her position, but to his dismay, Allen has followed him into the room and is horrified by the sight. Nick explains that Helena was in an accident and he had to amputate her legs. Allen states that she should have been taken to the hospital, but Nick assures him that he can care for her. To get the man off his back, Nick promises to resign soon and write a recommendation letter. This puts Allen in a difficult situation since he desperately wants the promotion. In the end, he agrees not to tell anyone about this and exits the house. Following the close call, Nick returns to Helena's room where she's crying and having a nervous breakdown. Nick tries to calm her down and brings her a wheelchair to help her move around the house. However, this frustrates her even more, and she begins hitting him with whatever she can find in the room. Even after Nick leaves, Helena continues her screaming fit until she eventually exhausts herself. The next day, Lawrence arrives to see Nick, whom he hasn't seen in days, but the latter doesn't answer the doorbell and hides inside until his friend leaves. Meanwhile, Anne also continues to call Nick, but he ignores her calls and eventually unplugs the phone. Later, when he's staring at Helena's photos, she suddenly arrives and calls him a loser. She also cruelly mentions that she regrets the one time they slept together because she didn't enjoy it and he was terrible. Nick is visibly hurt by her words, but he remains calm and endures every insult she throws at him. I may only be 3 inches long, but now you're only 3 feet tall. Elsewhere, Ray is seen frantically searching for Helena around the town. He eventually gets to the grocery store where she used to order deliveries and requests that the clerk notify him if she contacts them. One evening, Nick and Helena are having dinner when Anne unexpectedly appears outside. Helena then begins to scream, hoping the woman will help her. However, Nick quickly gags her and confines her in a room. He then invites Anne inside, who wishes to reconcile with him. She begins to seduce him in the living room, and they eventually get down to business. Meanwhile, a gagged Helena watches the scene from a small gap in the door. During their intimate session, Nick notices Helena's face on Anne's, and he's unable to last even 3 seconds. He feels embarrassed and apologizes, but Anne assures him that it is normal. 3 inches, 3 seconds. I get it. Afterward, the two begin to eat dinner while Helena remains locked inside. Just then, Nick's telephone rings, leaving him in shock. He is enraged when he discovers that Anne had plugged the phone back in when she entered. He tells her that he doesn't want anything to do with her and asks her to leave. This deeply upsets Anne, so she grabs her stuff and leaves. As Nick closes the door, he notices Ray snooping around. Feeling scared, he quickly calls the flower shop and requests that they make a delivery to Helena's house in his name. Nick then returns to Helena and removes the gag from her mouth. She immediately starts mocking him, saying he didn't even last 3 seconds earlier. She taunts him further, claiming that the same thing happened when they made love years ago. Nick angrily responds that women lie all the time and pretend to be satisfied, which she could have done. Weird flex, but okay. However, Helena coldly states that she doesn't love him and sees no reason to protect his feelings. She then begins to strangle him, but as she does, Nick sees a vision of his mother in her. The next day, Ray arrives at Helena's apartment and discovers the flowers Nick sent her. This leads him to believe Nick isn't the culprit, as he's also looking for her. Back at the mansion, we see that Nick has severed Helena's hands after she attempted to strangle him. He brings her flowers and professes his love once more, but Helena coldly responds that no matter what he does, she will never love him. She also says that if Ray finds out about this, he will kill him. However, Nick insists that no other man will accept her condition or be able to care for her like him. While she continues insulting him, Nick says that if she truly wishes for his death, he can fulfill her wish. He then takes out a gun and threatens to shoot himself. Helena urges him to stop, knowing that if he goes ahead with it, she will be alone with no one to care for her. Hence, she agrees to accept her miserable situation and requests that he put down the gun. A delighted Nick then lays his head on her lap and imagines the two of them making love. In the evening, he brings an escort home and starts making love to her in the living room. Meanwhile, Helena watches the scene from her room and finds herself aroused. Nick performs surprisingly well this time, which leaves Helena shocked. The next morning, he asks her how he did the night before.
I just didn't picture my mom this time. It lasted like an hour.
But she lies that she didn't pay attention. Nick then says that he only did it to better serve and please her in the future. In the following days, Nick tends to Helena in every possible way. He styles her hair, applies her lipstick, and carries her around the house to ensure she's never alone. He reads her novels and they have meals and drinks together. Helena has also accepted her situation, knowing that no one else is going to care for her in such a state. One day, while they are having dinner, Helena asks him if he loves her as a woman or just as a possession. Nick responds that he loves her as a woman and is willing to go to any length for her. They then share a passionate kiss, and Helena requests that he order her some groceries. Nick obliges and calls the local store for some vodka, lime juice, and pomegranates, but this makes the shopkeeper suspicious, as he recalls that Helena used to order these items regularly. Therefore, he immediately calls Ray to inform him of the situation. Shortly after, Ray arrives at the house and sees Nick and Helena making out, which enrages him. He charges at them, but when he finally sees Helena's condition, he's taken aback. Ray accuses Nick of kidnapping her and launches a brutal attack. He eventually subdues him and prepares to shoot him dead, but Helena stops him in the nick of time. She declares that she truly loves Nick and can't live without him. Upon hearing this, an annoyed Ray knocks the doctor unconscious and leaves the house. In the aftermath of this incident, Helena asks Nick to wake up, and he slowly begins to open his eyes, but he is unexpectedly crushed by a falling Venus statue. Nick then wakes up in the hospital, and surprisingly, there are no bruises on him. Moments later, Dr. Allen arrives and explains that he's been sleeping for some time now, and that Helena, who came with him, is still in her room. The doctor reveals that her operation lasted for 6 continuous hours, but that she is fine. Hearing this, Nick immediately rushes to see Helena and finds her unconscious in a bed. He pulls her hands to kiss them, and we learn that everything that happened after the truck accident was just a dream of his. In reality, he had called for an ambulance, and she had undergone a lengthy surgery. As for Nick, he simply fell asleep waiting for her. The movie ends as he returns home and embraces the Venus statue, imagining it as Helena. The movie should have ended with his limbs being transplanted to her, and also, she's his mom.
There you go, Hollywood. There you go.
Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.